Peace to the family. Now we do. I just wanted to speak on for a second. I was thinking about an analogy to explain alchemy, right? And it kind of spilled over into some other concepts as well. So I wanted to share it and, put a timestamp, put it on record, right? So I'm a science guy. I'm not a religion guy at all. I'm with comedic science is my thing because it connects to an understanding of quantum astrophysics and quantum physics, in my opinion. And not so much, there's a comedic religion too. It's not what I got on here to talk about, but that's how I start off with. That are not as, I don't resonate with as much, right? So anyway, I talk to people, my brother and some others who are curious, who have various opinions. And it helps me think of things. And it helps me think of things like, when people say, to be a science guy, you have to be a technology guy. You rely on technology a lot. And I had a particular conversation with a guy who said that, and I think he was looking at, and I did tell him this, but I think he was looking at, for instance, telescopes or microscopes as being technology, right? So we had got off into this whole conversation of what technology is, and then what you believe as far as what scientists say or mathematicians say instead of understanding it on your own. We talked about how 4 times 4 is complex to small to people who don't know it. And if you know it, you're smart. But to people who know what 64 times 64 is, that's not complex at all. But there's people who know what 4 times 4 is. And there's people that don't know right off their head what 64 times 64 is. And so someone who can say that right off the top of their head, they look at them as smart. Well, there's people that's on the next step and the next step and the next step up. It doesn't mean, and some people get stuck in the level they're on, so when they look on the level above, it's like they don't even believe it. I don't believe you. I don't believe that's even possible because you're not on that level of understanding. That's like a kid saying, I don't believe 4 times 4 is 16. That don't even make sense. Because you got 4 all the way up to 16. That's a whole 12 more. They don't understand the concept. Grown people do that with science, with math. And they get stuck on the level that they're at. So, for example, the guy was telling me how microscope, basically after the conversation came down to it, he was calling technology and high-end technology was a microscope and a telescope. It's not high-end technology, right? And so basically it's a combination of mirrors, not mirrors, glass, concave and convex glass that you look through. That's it. It's a combination of that to get as far out as possible or to get as small as possible. And they make it in different size tubes that go from this size to as big as a whole building to hold the same concept. And so you break it down to that, it's not really high technology. It's only high technology to some. And a lot of this stuff you can verify on your own, right? So I thought about that. Telescope is nothing more than metal and sand, really, to make the glass, right? So A good analogy for alchemy is if you took a pile of metal, a pile of sand, and let's say a leaf, right? And you just, think, you can think at whatever time stamp in this world that you want, because it doesn't really make a difference. So you can think of yourself as being a billionaire today, being able to do it. You can think of yourself as being some scavenger off in the desert who knew alchemy back in Egypt, back in the day. You can picture yourself as some wizard in England's castle somewhere who was studying the same thing, or some shaman out in India, or some voodoo priest out in Jamaica, or they all was practicing the same concepts. And it's the concept of taking the elements that you have to learn, taking the elements you have to learn about yourself, knowing thyself. So, okay, so pile of glass, no, pile of sand, pile of metal, and a leaf, right? Basically, you can create a telescope and a microscope, and you can probably look up a documentary on YouTube right now, how to make a telescope. They'll start off with a pile of metal and a pile of sand. They'll run it through these processes. They'll fold the metals in certain ways. They'll make the glass out of the sand. They'll make concave, and they'll get it to a certain way that they can see certain things that you can't see with your regular eye, right? And let's say they make a microscope. So he's making tiny versions instead of big house versions. They're making little tiny versions of the same thing, little metal tube, little concave glass in front of another concave glass, in front of a convex glass, and another mirror to bounce it back up to you so you can see it. That's all the same thing. Now you look under there. Now you made a microscope out of sand and metal, and then you take the leaf and just stick it under the microscope, and then you look. And then you find a whole other living civilization, living on one droplet of water sitting on a leaf. You see 1,000 microorganisms interacting with each other, some avoiding others, some having, more social relationships with others and adjusting to its environment, oblivious seemingly that you're looking at it sometimes not. So you realize a lot of this, and you've actually gotten to a place where you have a greater understanding of the world just from a pile of metal, a pile of sand, and a leaf. It's a generalized concept, but that's the concept. You can make it small enough to a scale to you're a single person that does it. Say you got yourself a oven ready, open flame wood oven or something that you can actually make and mold some metal and make some glass with, and you know how to do that. You could be somewhere and actually do that yourself, right? I'm just saying it's possible. And if it's possible on a smaller scale, it's possible for 2 or 3 guys to do it. It's possible for a whole civilization to do it over 2 days, over 2 years, over 2,000 years. It doesn't change it. Alchemy doesn't mean that it's instant, right? And that's a broader scale of alchemy. That's just the beginning. I use alchemy as a broad term there, but it's more of a concept. And it's the same thing. You reverse the mirror and reverse the glass, and you look up to the sky. And what you'll notice, which I've spoken on this before, is as you look further out into the sky in astrophysics, and you look further down at the smaller quantum physics level, you'll notice a whole lot of similarities and rotations. The key to a lot of it is empty space and rotation and movements and vibration and how that interacts, and magnetism, right? And the structures and the shapes that is very similar. And what you'll also find out is you're just another one in between them. You're just another organism on a smaller scale than a planet, but a bigger scale than a micron, electron, neutron. Any small organism has the same basis. And so when you realize that, and you realize you're just another level up, and it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets smaller and it gets smaller, you know, now there's something that makes up electrons now. It used to be just electrons and protons and neutrons. Now it's something that makes up those. And then there's going to be something here in a couple of years that make up those, and it's the same thing on another level. So you start to understand the universe. And then you look around and you see the similarities, and then that tells you something about you, because you're just the same way, just on a smaller scale. So if something happens on a smaller scale and a bigger scale to you, and you're made out of the same thing, and you're in the middle scale, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. That's the concept. And that happens. And it's taboo, and it's looked on, and it's frowned upon in regular social society, because a lot of people don't know how to explain it. Because there's a constraint with words and explaining certain things, and languages and explaining certain things, and I'll get to that on a whole other deal. But I just wanted to share that. I'm gonna come back to it and perfect the concept, but I just wanted to put that out there. Peace.